Israel, the victim. Hilarious. So look, first of all, she said Israel wasn't doing anything on October 6th. Yeah, of course you were. You were occupying the Palestinians for the 57th year in a row.
There wasn't a single Israeli in the Gaza Strip on October 6th. There wasn't a single Israeli in the Gaza Strip, except the ones that they're holding hostage. Those ones were in the Gaza Strip.
This would happen. I told the producers ahead of time, there is no Israeli supporter that doesn't talk over you. You think that you feel entitled to the airtime.
Always trying to shut down your own guy?
Your lives are more valuable.
Hot kettle black. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be a hypocrite. Okay. Because the Islamic Republic of Iran is firing rockets on Israel. I do not think that this is Israel's fault in any way, shape, or form. I think that Israel has been on the receiving end from multiple terror proxies of this regime, including Hezbollah since October 8th and Hamas since October 7th, firing indiscriminately at Israeli civilians here on the ground, and that is no different whether the place of origin is in Tehran or in Beirut or near Beirut or in the Gaza Strip. Yeah, I find that highly ironic given the fact that the Islamic Republic itself is occupying all of those countries that you mentioned, which is the source of the problem. If these terror proxies, if these countries that were being colonized by the Islamic Republic did not have that problem of the Islamic Republic, we would not be in this position. And you know, you love to talk about occupation, except on October 6th, Israel wasn't attacking Gaza. It wasn't attacking the West Bank. It wasn't attacking anyone, certainly not the Islamic Republic. And yet, we still received a massacre of civilians, men, women, and children who were kidnapped and raped and murdered brutally in front of their families, children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children. We still have 101 hostages in Hamas captivity. None of that is Israel's fault. And what you're doing, Cenk, is you're blaming the victim. Well, I think it's ridiculous that Cenk really has no horse in this race. He is not Palestinian or even Arab, and he certainly isn't Jewish or Israeli and doesn't live here, so I'm not even sure why he's so impassioned about this. But it seems that any time Israel defends itself in any capacity, Cenk has a problem with it. I'd really like to know, Cenk, what do you think Israel should have done in response to October 7th? Do you think Israel should not react? And also, you're making a critical mistake that I've seen a lot of people make since October 7th, and that is equating the actions of a terrorist organization carrying out a crime against civilians with a defensive war. What Israel's obligations and what their agenda was from the beginning after October 7th was dismantling Hamas and ensuring that they're not able to commit similar attacks like that in the future. That has been the objective, and of course to bring our hostages home. That has been the objective of the IDF since day one. I am sorry that there are civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, but this is a byproduct of the use of human shields in the Gaza Strip, and of course, also endangering civilians by firing and carrying out terrorist operations, terrorist headquarters near UN facilities, near mosques, inside of schools. All of these things we have seen on a regular basis from the Gaza Strip. And in fact, Hamas leaders themselves have bragged about using human shields. This isn't something new. It isn't even something debatable. Now, you can talk about how much precaution Israel has taken or was it enough. Those are all legitimate debates. But to hear you come on this show and claim that Israel has slaughtered 41,000 Palestinians as if they're all just innocent Palestinian children sitting around, when in fact, at least 18,000 of them have been confirmed to be terrorists, not to mention the fact that I don't hear you going around criticizing the recruitment of Palestinian children to terror organizations, whether it's Islamic Jihad, whether it's Hamas or other organizations. There are 14 to 17-year-olds, thousands of them, who have been recruited by these terrorist organizations. That alone is child abuse. But of course, when it comes to reporting casualties, which are coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which of course is run by Hamas, there's no differentiation between terrorists and civilians. He doesn't actually live in the Middle East, and he isn't actually dealing with what we are dealing with, both Arabs and Jews, from the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's a reason that we saw Lebanese and Syrians celebrating when Hassan Nasrallah was killed. But on to your question about failed diplomacy of the West, I do think that the West has absolutely failed. I think that the Iran deal, and in general, the policies of appeasement that we have seen from various governments, both in Canada, in Europe, and in the United States over the years, I'm not going to place any responsibility on one specific party or even individual, because it's been multiple steps that have been taken, or rather not taken. But this policy of appeasement has allowed the Islamic Republic to strengthen their terror proxies. This has been a long-standing strategy of the regime in Iran, and it's something that's continuing until today. And that is why we've seen, and by the way, I just want to add one more thing about diplomacy, which it's not exactly diplomacy, but UNIFIL, the UN agency that's responsible for keeping Hezbollah in line on that border, has failed to do so for years. And the consequence of that is that we have over 60,000 displaced Israeli families for now 11 months, because there's been over 8,000 projectiles fired at us by Hezbollah. We didn't start launching anything at Hezbollah. They started launching at us. And so to place the blame squarely on Israel and say that this all is because of something that they did, or that, you know, most ridiculously, that we want a regional war, it's just patently absurd. Israel's approach from day one has been, if you want peace with us, we want peace with you too. And that's not the reality that we're seeing on the ground. And, you know, he said, oh, the Arab states would make peace with Israel if occupation. That is ridiculous. I mean, if we look at the problem here, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's not even about the Arab states. Iran is not an Arab country. And that is the problem. And the problem beyond that is them colonizing and occupying, in a way, different countries in the Arab world. That's the core of the problem. And so, of course, the diplomacy from the West has failed to rein in the Islamic regime.
All right.
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to the U.S. elections, obviously we're going to see a harsher policy when it comes to the Islamic Republic from a Trump administration than we would expect to see from a Harris administration. I do think that both candidates are generally supportive of Israel. And I do want to clarify the point that I've made to Cenk before, but the AIPAC, the lobbying group, it's an American Israeli lobbying organization. It is not representative of the Israeli government. In fact, they have promoted policies that do not act in the interest of the Israeli government at various times. What they promote is the U.S.-Israel relationship because it's mutually beneficial. And beyond that, the aid package that goes to the state of Israel every year is not actually aid. It's not a handout. It's not checks that are going to Israeli citizens or even to the Israeli military. It's required reinvestment in American companies. It actually creates American jobs. Cenk knows this, and he is intentionally misrepresenting what AIPAC is and what they actually do, because apparently he has a problem, once again, with Jews defending themselves. And I just think it's ridiculous. It's obvious that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The United States receives critical intelligence from Israel. They also receive technology and developments when it comes to especially missile defense, which was jointly developed, such as Iron Dome, jointly developed with the United States. These are tools that keep Americans safe, especially American soldiers who are overseas, whether in war or in times of relative peace. And we have seen that in action on the ground in Iraq, for example, where the U.S. Embassy and U.S. targets have been targeted repeatedly by, again, proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So yes, it is absolutely mutually beneficial for American citizens to have this aid package with Israel. Of course it is. They are allies. That is what allies do. And I love that you act as if it's so unusual or so much different than what other countries are doing, even in the United States or Europe or Canada or really any country. There are many countries, and it's within their right to advance what's in their interest. That is a logical response. We see Qatar do it, we see Iran do it, we see Israel do it. Despite that, that's not what we're seeing with AIPAC. Again, AIPAC is an American organization. They represent the U.S.-Israel relationship. That is their goal. That is what they promote. That is what they focus on. It does not represent Netanyahu. It does not represent the Israeli government. And Cenk, you know this. You just don't like Israel, which is the same thing we see from all of your material. You never answered my question, by the way, about what you think Israel should actually do in response to October 7th. How do you advocate getting hostages home? I think Israel and the majority of Israelis have been pretty clear from day one that the problem isn't a theoretical Palestinian state. The problem is that Palestinian leaders have repeatedly refused to negotiate, refused to accept peace offers, refused to accept state in certain circumstances, all the way going back to 1947 when they rejected, and instead multiple Arab states decided to launch a war against the state of Israel. There could have been a Palestinian state today. I think that in the future, in the long term, it's definitely possible that there will be. But we need to see a fundamental change on the grassroots level as well, because there's been such an indoctrination of this deep-seated appreciation or revelry for violence, for terrorism, the acceptance of barbaric, inhumane acts, such as what we saw on October 7th. I mean, we saw that the polls, the initial polls, the month after, a couple of months after October 7th, said 80%, roughly 80% of Palestinians, both in Gaza and the West Bank, supported the actions of October 7th. So there's a massive problem with incitement and indoctrination, and that's probably not going to change until you have a government that's serious about changing it. And what does that look like? That looks like what we saw with the Abraham Accords. It looks like changing the materials in the schools that are being taught to children, like we've seen in Saudi Arabia, like we've seen in Morocco. Talking about the cooperation that Arabs and Jews do have as people who are from this region. And I think that that's what's missing in the Palestinian equation. And the day that Palestinians have a leadership that's serious about dealing with that issue, we're going to be in a very different reality. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have that. So when it comes to Israel's right to self-defense and Israel's ability to protect their own civilians, what guarantee does the state of Israel have that they're not going to be getting 15, 20, 25,000 rockets like we've seen when Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip with the aim of promoting Palestinian sovereignty? And instead, what we got in return were thousands, tens of thousands of rockets, of massacres, of murders, of kidnappings, and the list goes on and on until today. You can't deny that there's a serious problem within Palestinian society of incitement to violence and support for terrorism. That has to change. Say that I don't understand how you can say accurately that Israel has a long-standing peace agreement with multiple Arab countries, including the more recent ones from the Abraham Accords, but at the same time, the problem is somehow Israel for being, as you call it, racist. So those two things cannot coexist. But beyond that, I think
why not let the Palestinians go?
I think from the long-term future, we need to deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. That is the reason that you see Arabs and Jews on the same side of this issue when it comes to dealing with terror proxies across the region, whether it's Yemen, Iraq, Syria, or Lebanon, including many Palestinians whom I know personally that have a much bigger problem with the Islamic Republic of Iran and what they're doing, which is, of course, pushing away regional peace, not just with Israel, but across other countries as well, instigating many civil wars, such as what we've seen in Lebanon for decades. This is the handiwork, the byproduct of the Islamic Republic. And we need to see regime change in Iran before we're going to see a meaningful peace across this region, at least region-wide. Again, that's rooted in complete disinformation. As I stated, it is in the American people's interest. But beyond that, I do think it's possible in my lifetime that there will be peace, and I certainly hope so. Of course, I want nothing but safety and security for the Palestinian people. But unfortunately, when you have a leadership that is a terrorist organization, that's very, very hard to do. So hopefully we will see that change in our lifetime. But right now, it doesn't look optimistic, at least for the immediate future.